Hi everyone, welcome to our course content coverage from Chapter 3. Thus far we have been introduced to some historical theories of leadership and have looked at a little more in depth at the trait theories and behavior theories of leadership models. Now we will learn more specifics about contingency theories. At the end of our last segment, I alluded to the next phase of research in the leadership realm. What researchers of leader traits and leader behaviors eventually discovered is that many different leadership styles can be effective, and that one factor that affects what leadership approach will be most effective is the situation in which the leadership activities occur. This research has led to another set of theories about leadership called contingency theories. Contingency theories they discuss what leaders can analyze about their situation and tailor their behavior to improve leadership effectiveness. Contingency theories are also known as situational theories. Leadership cannot be understood in a vacuum, separate from various elements of the group or organizational situation. Leaders can adjust their style depending on different variables involved, like people, the environment, time frames, etc. A leadership style that works in one situation might not work in another situation. There is no one best way of leadership, hence contingency means, quote, it depends, end quote. The basic tenet of the focus of contingency theories is that behavior that is effective in some circumstances might not be effective under different conditions. Thus, the effectiveness of leadership behavior is contingent upon organizational situations. Aptly called contingency approaches, these theories explain the relationship between leadership styles and effectiveness in specific situations. The contingencies most important to leadership, as shown on this slide, are the situation itself and followers. Research implies that situational variables such as task, structure, context, and environment are important to leadership style. And the nature of followers has also been identified as a key contingency. In other words, the needs, maturity, and cohesiveness of followers makes a significant difference to the best style of leadership. Here, the contingency approach reinforces the concepts of the leader, followers, and situations. So we have to be able to reach all three and be able to adjust accordingly in order to create the best outcomes for the project at hand or organization. Now, there are 4 contingency theories for us to learn about today. Hersey and Blanchard's situational model of leadership, Fiedler's contingency model, the path-goal model of leadership, and the Vroom-Jago model. Hersey and Blanchard's extension of the leadership grid, which we discussed in the previous chapter and lecture, focuses on the characteristics of followers as the important element of the situation, and consequently of determining effective leader behavior. The point of Hersey and Blanchard's theory is that subordinates vary in their level of readiness. So people might be low in task readiness because of little ability or training or insecurities, or they may need a different leadership style if they're less experienced or whatever, than those who are high in readiness and have good abilities or experiences, high skills, confidence, and a willingness to work. So according to this situational theory, a leader might adopt one of 4 leadership styles based on a combination of relationship, like their concern for people or employees, and their concern for tasks or production. The appropriate style depends on the readiness level of the followers. So it all goes back to your group members, your subordinates, your employees, your followers. So on this slide, I have the diagram of the leadership grid that was discussed last time. And on the right-hand side, there is the diagram of the situational model of leadership. And so the arrow is representing how these ideas from each of these models are kind of merged. So on the right-hand side of this slide, the upper part of the diagram indicates the style of the leader, which is based on a combination of concern for people, like we said, and a concern for production tasks or being goal-oriented. Now, the bell-shaped curve that you see in the middle of the diagram is called a prescriptive curve because it indicates when each leadership style should be used. So the 4 styles that this model talks about are telling, selling, participating, and delegating. So the telling style is a directive approach that reflects a high concern for tasks and a low concern for people and relationships. The selling style is based on a high concern for both relationships and tasks. The participating style characterizes both is characterized by high relationship and low task behavior. And then the delegating style reflects a low concern for both tasks and relationships. So at the bottom part of this diagram is really where it shows when to use which leadership style. So, for example, when there's low readiness of your workers, you want to be able to use the telling leader style. This is going to be most effective because you are basically giving a lot of direction and a lot of structure as to how to get something done. And research has found that workers who fall in that low readiness classification need a little bit more hand-holding or direction. They need more boundary setting and attention. And that's not a bad thing. That's just a leadership style or approach then that is most effective to meeting your goals and outcomes. If you find that your workers are at a moderate level of readiness, then the selling leader style is the best option to utilize. When your worker group has a high level of readiness, the best leadership style to use is the participating leader style. This is effective because you are showing high value to the relationships of your workers. You're placing significance on the people and what's important to building a strong work group by taking into consideration the personal attributes of your workers. Lastly, when you're work team is of a very high readiness level, this is when the delegating leader style will be most beneficial. Fiedler and his associates developed a model of leadership that takes not only followers, but other elements of the situation into consideration. So the basic idea of this leadership approach is to match the leader's style with the situation most favorable for his or her success. The leadership model described by Fiedler is designed to diagnose whether a leader is task-oriented or relationship-oriented, like we've talked about before, and match the leadership style to the situation. In this model, the situation is either considered to be favorable or unfavorable, as determined by which then determines which leadership style is most effective. So the favorability of the situation is based on three key elements: the quality of leader-member relationships, task structure, and position power. So leader-member relations has to do with the group atmosphere and members' attitudes toward and acceptance of the leader. The task structure is the extent to which tasks performed by the group are defined, involve specific procedures, and have clear, explicit goals. And the position power is the extent to which the leader has formal authority over subordinates. What this slide shows is that when leader-member relations are good, task structure is high, and position power is strong, the situation is considered to be highly favorable to the leader. When the leader-member relations are poor, task structure is low, and leader position power is weak, the situation is considered highly unfavorable to the leader. The situation would be considered moderately favorable when some of the three elements are high and others are low. Task-oriented leaders are more effective when the situation is either highly favorable or highly unfavorable. In those circumstances, worker groups do better with more direction and goal-oriented approaches. Relationship-oriented leaders are more effective in situations of moderate favorability. The third contingency model that we're looking at today is the path-goal model. The path-goal model is a contingency approach to leadership in which the leader's responsibility is to increase subordinates' motivation to attain personal and organizational goals. So this slide shows that as the leader increases follower motivation, they can do this by either clarifying the follower's path to the rewards that are available, or by increasing the rewards that the follower values and desires. So rewards or incentives can be either intrinsic rewards that derive from the work itself, or extrinsic rewards such as raises or promotions, or some other kind of external incentive. In this model, there are 4 leadership behaviors. This slide shows the impact of each leader behavior based on specific situations that lead to positive outcomes. The 4 leader behaviors are supportive leadership, directive leadership, achievement-oriented leadership, and participative leadership. Supportive leadership shows concern for subordinates' well-being and personal needs. The leader's behavior is open and friendly and approachable, and the leader creates a team climate and treats subordinates as equals. The directive leadership approach tells subordinates exactly what they are supposed to do. The leader behavior includes planning, making schedules, setting performance goals and behavior standards, and stressing adherence to rules and regulations. The participative leadership is more of a consulting situation where the leader consults with subordinates about decisions. The leader behavior includes asking for opinions and suggestions, encouraging participation in decision making, and meeting with subordinates in their workspaces. The achievement-oriented leadership sets clear and challenging goals for subordinates. Leader behavior stresses high quality performance and improvement over current performance. So when you look at the diagram on this slide, you'll see the different leader behaviors that are attached to specific situations and the impact on the followers that that leadership behavior has in order to produce positive outcomes. So in the situation where a follower lacks self-confidence or experience, it's helpful to use a supportive leadership behavior style because this will increase confidence to achieve the work outcome, which then increases effort, improves satisfaction, and increases performance. As opposed to a situation where maybe an incorrect reward or incentive has been imposed, you might rely on the participative leadership behavior because this will help clarify what followers need to change and what rewards make sense to them based on their input and opinions. And by doing that, you will also increase those efforts, improve satisfaction, and increase performance. So that's what this slide is meant to show you, is sort of which leadership behavior in which situation impacts followers in a positive way that will increase the likelihood of you achieving the outcomes that you hope for. In this model, leaders can analyze the appropriate degree of participation of followers by answering 7 diagnostic questions. These questions are around decision significance. How significant is this decision for the project at hand or the organization? If the decision is highly important and a high quality decision is needed for the success of the project or organization, the leader has to be actively involved. The second question has to do with the importance of commitment. How important is subordinate commitment to carrying out the decision? If implementation requires a high level of commitment to the decision, leaders should involve subordinates in the decision-making process. The third question has to do with leader expertise. What is the level of the leader's expertise in relation to the problem? If the leader does not have a high amount of information, knowledge, or expertise, the leader should involve subordinates in order to obtain it. Likelihood of commitment is what the fourth diagnostic question revolves around. If the leader were to make the decision alone, would subordinates have high or low commitment to the decision? How invested would they be? If subordinates typically go along with whatever the leader decides, their involvement in the decision-making process will be less important. The fifth diagnostic question revolves around group support for goals. What is the degree of subordinate support for the teams or projects, or organization's objectives at stake in this decision. If subordinates have low support for the goals of the organization, the leader should not allow the group to make the decision alone. The sixth question has to do with goal expertise. What is the level of group members' knowledge and expertise in relation to the problem? If subordinates have a high level of expertise in relation to the problem, more responsibility for the decision should be delegated to them. And the last diagnostic question has to do with team competence. How skilled and committed are group members to working together as a team to solve problems? When subordinates have high skills and a high desire to work together cooperatively to solve problems, more responsibility for the decision making can be delegated to them. So once these diagnostic questions have been answered sequentially, then leaders can select a participation style, either based on a time-sensitive model, or like if time is critically important, if time is of the essence, like if the organization is facing a crisis and a decision has to be made immediately. Or they can use a development-based model. If time and efficiency are less important criteria than the opportunity to develop the thinking and decision-making skills of followers. So just a quick example, oftentimes decisions might be made based on a development-based model when you're doing some sort of strategic planning. When you're looking ahead at what changes you want to see happen, and developing a plan of action in order to make those changes happen. So when you're setting new goals or putting new programs or services into place or something like that. So to recap, the most important point in this chapter and in this discussion is that situational variables affect leadership outcomes. The contingency approaches were developed to systematically address the relationship between a leader and the organization. The contingency approaches focus on how the components of leadership style, subordinate characteristics, and situational elements all affect one another. So Hersey and Blanchard's situational theory, Fiedler's contingency model, the path goal theory, and the Vroom-Jago model all examine how different situations call for different styles of leadership behavior. By discerning the characteristics of tasks, subordinates, and organizations, leaders can determine the style that increases the likelihood of successful leadership outcomes. Therefore, effective leadership depends partly on developing diagnostic skills and being flexible in your leadership behavior.